We are now live, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome, everybody, to the last meeting in December. Well, the last meeting in 2021, I think. I don't know where it's all gone. It's shocked by, but this is gone anywhere. Right. Have we got any substitutes nominated, please?
Yes, Chair. We have Councillor Courtney substituting for Councillor B. Smith. And we have apologies for Councillor B. Smith.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Just remind you all to declare any pecuniary interests or and other interests that might have relation to this evening's meeting. The usual nil return on that one. Admission to the public. I mean, it's open to the public. I suppose there's nothing I'm exempt on here, so I don't know if it's joined us, but it's on YouTube anyway, isn't it? The minutes of the last meeting. Anyone like to propose those, please? Thanks, Dave. Seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Is that Regan? Yeah, thank you. Can't see you very well. Okay, then. Before we just go into the... Is Andrew Pitts here, by the way? Can't see you.
Yes, Chair.
Oh, yes, thank God for that. I'm just running out to do... I keep missing people with their hands up, mainly because there's too many people on this screen. Although I might be able to do it today. So what do you want to do? Do you want to wave or do you want to put your little yellow flashy sign up? Which you prefer? But don't say chat, because I can't zip in and out of that thing. Has anybody got any preferences?
I think you're probably better with the raised hand.
Yeah. Okay. Come here with raised hand.
Virtually, not this.
Yeah, I think if you use the raised hand, then it automatically puts the person who's raised the hand at the top left of your screen if you've got it on grid view, and in order.
Yeah.
Well, I've just raised mine, and I can't see my hand. But anyway,
yours has gone brown, Peter.
I don't think you'll see your own.
Oh, don't you? Okay.
Yeah, I can see my own, and I can see Sarah's, who's a nice pink one. But yours is a brown one, Peter. I didn't. Well, I mean, I'm just amazed that you guys know how to change the colour of your.
I can assure you, it's an accident. So can we not use brown because I can't see it on the screen?
I wouldn't know about changing it.
Right. Okay. Lower. I've got a little reminder lower. Sorry about this technical thing, but I need to get this right because I keep missing people. Right. Can we start on the first paper, please? The housing, not the housing, sorry, the waste and recycling. As you know, it's been sort of a quite contentious concern lately. But what I'd like to do really is concentrate on, learn from what we've learned so far and just build on how we'd like to see it improved in the future. So we're looking at the future shape of the contract, the way it's going to be delivered and everything else, bearing in mind what we've seen. So if we could just sort of concentrate on that rather than a post-mortem. Although having said that, it's a sort of post-mortem because we want to look at what's not right and what is good and build it into what we want in the future. So is everybody okay with that approach? Okay. Andrew, do you want to fire away? Sorry, I can't see you, but I'm sure you're there.
I think Zora's just going to do a bit of an introduction.
Sorry, Zora, but apologise.
And I'll deal with any detailed questions.
So you've kind of passed this poison challenge on, have you?
No. I think actually, Chair, I think you've almost covered what I was going to say anyway. So This is really just a very brief introduction to set out, the reason for us, the purpose for us coming here tonight is that our current contract for waste and recycling is due to expire in 2024. And whilst that sounds some way off still, actually, this is the time when we need to start thinking about it and start doing some planning and moving towards it. So the report that you've got before you sets out some background to the current contract. It refers to the collection performance targets, which we know have come under pressure because of the pandemic and the HGV driver shortages. But a new contract gives us that opportunity, which you've alluded to, Chair, to think about any changes we'd like to introduce, anything we might want to do differently, any good practice we've seen elsewhere that we might want to think about what that might look like in Calderdale. So the reason for coming tonight is really just to start that conversation with yourself as members and to start getting those ideas so that as we start to refine what might look like a specification for a new contract, which will take over the next 12 months probably to do, but it gives us time to start that conversation and just start thinking about those ideas and to hear from yourselves as members about the sorts of innovations that you would like to see in the new contract. And on that point, Chair, I think I'll pass you over to Andrew, if you like, and Andrew can go through some ideas in a bit more detail and hopefully tease some things out of yourselves about what you'd like to see going forwards.
Yeah, no, that's great. Right, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, Chair, just briefly from me, as Zora says, there's quite a lot of information in the report on the current contract and how things currently operate. But on the last page of the report, page 7, I've just put down some questions. It's not an exhaustive list by any means, but just a number of questions that I thought it would be useful for us to glean your views on. Things like, is a weekly collection of food waste vital? Things like, should we look at reducing the frequency to fortnightly? Recycling for all residents in the new contract, getting the sort of cost savings and environmental benefits that come through less vehicle movements. Should we go to 3 weekly refuse collection? That has been shown in other authorities to be a good driver of increased recycling. We are good at recycling. I just looked up before this meeting, actually. Last year we recycled about 54% of our material collected, which placed us as 37th out of just short of 350 local authorities. So, we're sort of in the top 10-ish % there. So we do well on recycling, but there's always scope to drive that up further. And the best performing authority is up at 66%. So, maybe changing to 3 weekly might help us do that. So I won't say any more, Chair. There are some questions there that, members might want to focus on. You might want to focus on other ones that I've not particularly picked out.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I mean, I've got things I want to kind of ask you about flexibility, but I'm going to throw it on to members first, please. Just kind of looking at that list on page 7. What do you think, or have you any other ideas how this should work better to address things before they go wrong rather than when they go wrong? So I'm throwing it open. Everybody's happy with the way it is? Oh no, hang on, there's a few hands up there. I don't know who was up first. I'll go across the screen. Regan.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Right. I'm just looking at it now, page 15 or 42. Right. The things I like the fact that we have a very high rate of recycling. I know it's better than the commingled approach that sewers have in Kirklees, for example. What I don't like, and it's a difficult one, is the spillage that occurs on windy days, especially if stuff's been left out because of missed collections. Because the problem isn't necessarily the collectors being in too much of a hurry and dropping stuff. Quite often it's stuff that gets wind tossed that's a real pain. My street, which is a cul-de-sac, there's been if the wind blows the right way, it can cause absolute mayhem, quite frankly. And that's even before the boys have had a chance to stuck it into the back of the wagon. I mean, to be honest, I like the guys. I mean, every team I've ever come across, they've always been friendly and courteous and helpful and done their best for us. When it comes to the food waste collection, I have the benefit of living on a north-facing back-to-back. So my stuff doesn't start cooking in the brown bin. I suspect that the people on the other side of the street, theirs probably does. So I'm not quite sure that going to fortnightly, especially in the summer months, would be a good idea for that. There is other stuff, and I'm going to have to come back to it because I was hoping initially to do it off the top of my head, but I'm going to have to make a couple of notes and come back if that's all right.
Stuff, yeah, we're not limited to one question here, no.
Yeah.
While you're doing that, Regan, I'll kind of move on to Sarah
yeah,
Courtney.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Dave was actually before me. Dave Young.
Was it? Oh,
his hand was up before me.
sorry,
and then-
Dave, I
then
couldn't
it was
see you.
me.
My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I've been involved with recycling since 1985 when I started a recycling project in a previous local authority where I was a councillor. So recycling has always been pretty close to my heart. Now, I think it's imperative that we maintain the weekly recycling collections, and that includes food waste, really, because especially in the summer, the recycling stuff has obviously changed a lot recently, and the demand for it is going up because of all the Amazon packages. And I can't see that changing. I don't think we are going to go back to the old normal. So I think it's imperative that we keep the weekly recycling collections. I'm also not totally convinced about changing to a 3 weekly waste collection. It will probably be okay for me and my wife, but if you've got a young family, you probably do need 2 weekly waste collection, else you're going to get a load of blue bags filled up and not have too much blue bags for one wheelie bin over a 3-week period. So, but more importantly, I really want the weekly recycling collections to continue in the new contract. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. I think I've got some sympathy with that, but, it's all right. I mean, there's 2 in our house, 2 or 3 in our house, and we could probably do 3 weeks, but if you've got a family of 6, you probably couldn't. So there are swings and roundabouts attached to that, but thanks for that. Sarah, back to you then.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me at Place Scrutiny. So my question would be, what the authorities that are doing better recycling than us, what are they doing? Have we done studies on those? I'm sure that that's all going to be part of the sort of review process for a new contract. But I would be, and not just the ones that are above us in recycling, but the ones that have a similar topography or equally, looking at, rural, because obviously, our borough is really varied in terms of, densely populated town areas and also very, very rural areas. So it would be interesting to know, to be able to sort of like compare our areas with like similar areas, and then look at sort of like what works for other authorities in those sorts of areas, so that then we can use their best practice. And if some of it is reducing down to 3 weeks, but then a really massive push on recycling and lots and lots of comms and positive action on it, and that's what works, and that's what has worked in XYZ borough, and there's evidence for that, then I think that sounds like it would be a good path to follow. In terms of other things that should be collected for recycling, I'd like to see plastic film, that it can be recycled. So things like bin bags, for example, that sort of, and silage wrappers absolutely can be recycled. The company that I work for actually uses those to recycle and turn into furniture. So I would like to not just see hard plastics recycled, but as collecting the films and the thinner bits as well. Yeah, those are my sort of two things. Just as much recycling as possible. Let's have as little waste as possible going into landfill or incineration or whatever. But yeah, let's find out what the other people who are doing it better than us, what are they doing?
Thank you, Sarah. Just before I move on, Andrew or Zora, do you want to just briefly answer it? Are we doing benchmarking against other councils, and why they apparently or allegedly do it better than we do? Is that part of the exercise, do you think?
Yeah, I'll pick.
Yeah.
Can I pick the points up so far, Chair? Then I don't sort of.
Well, yeah, I was about to say
lose them. Is that all right?
Keep referring to you rather than build it all up and wait for the end. If that's all right. Yeah.
Okay. If just to take Councillor Dickinson's point about spillage, yeah, it's been even before I got involved with the waste contract. I mean, I know Heidi's on the call, and I'm sure she'll attest to this. It has always been an issue. The spillage from vehicles was not solved, but was helped significantly with the new contract, with the design of the vehicles that we now have. I think, as you alluded to, there's a bit of a trade-off here. It's very easy to do a commingled sealed container type collection process, whereby you avoid the sort of spillage and things blowing about all over the place. But the downside of that is you don't get the recycling rates out of it, because you're losing from that commingle collection. As you say, Kirklees have a commingle collection system, and their recycling rate is considerably lower than ours. Let me put it that way. I don't know the precise figure, but it's considerably lower than ours. So a lot of this is, there's no perfect solution. It's about those sort of trade-offs, and that's why we're wanting to have these sort of discussions with members on food waste. I totally agree with you on that. In summer in particular, we've a lot of feedback from people saying that we've had a lot of feedback over this summer. Obviously the caddies are lockable and all that sort of thing, but as you said, they become receptacles in which things cook, basically. So that is something that we would be, I think, keen to try and retain, because the other thing on food is that in terms of its contribution to the carbon agenda, if you like, it really does offer big benefits if you can collect food waste. And the final thing is, I suspect that it will be a statutory requirement anyway when the Environment Bill finally gets through Parliament. Just moving on very quickly to Councillor Young's point. Yeah, he's absolutely right. The volumes of recyclable material, I think we went up to 22,000 tonnes this year. It's in the report. We've never been over 18 before, so there has been a rocketing in that, and a lot of it has been the home shopping type stuff, no doubt about it. The only thing I will say, one interesting statistic on recycling in Calderdale, and this is something that we need to work on, is less than 50% of people actually put their recycling out weekly. Now, leaving aside any of the issues that we've had, this is actually based on pre-pandemic figures. So a lot of people don't actually take advantage of that service that we provide. Now, just reassure Councillor Young, I'm not saying we shouldn't continue to provide weekly recycling, but we need to just take cognizance of that. On Councillor Courtney's point about other local authorities and learning from similar authorities, not comparing us with a London borough or something like that, absolutely, that's part of the work we will do moving forward. And it's part of the work that I refer in the report to the consultancy, Circulogic, who have been working with us, funded through RAP at no cost to Calderdale Council, to look at how we might evaluate various actions. And I know some of the work that they've done has been about how can we learn from other authorities that are doing different things to us. And the criteria that they've used, this is back to this trade-off issue, to assess the different sort of options or service configurations that there are around these things of the sort of cost, which is always going to be a consideration. It's got to be a consideration. If we'd unlimited resources, I think that would be fantastic. But the reality isn't, we haven't, and we're not likely to have. So we've got to have a think about that. The climate, I've mentioned the sort of carbon issues. What's the impact on climate and air quality agendas? The customer, again, a trade-off. I live in Bradford, I have 2 bins, I just put my general waste in one and I just chuck everything else that's recyclable in another. From a customer point of view, that is so easy, but Bradford's recycling rates, similarly, are very poor compared to Calderdale's. And then finally, compliance. I've mentioned the Environment Bill and National Waste Strategy. There are things on the horizon. You might have heard of, it's referred to as DRS, the Deposit Return Scheme. For those of you as old as me who remember taking glass bottles back to the corner shop and getting an old sixpence in return or whatever. It's that sort of principle, but a bit more 21st century. And also things like the packaging, the idea of putting tax on certain type of packaging to try and get people to use packaging that is, less of it, preferably. But if they are using packaging, using stuff that is recyclable or easy to recycle. Most things can be recycled. The issue is the cost of doing it a lot of the time. So that's all I'll say so far, Chair. I hope that sort of addressed some of the points that have been raised by members.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Andrew. Steph, did you have your hand up, or have you turned it down again? You don't mute.
I've taken it down. I think most of the things that I was thinking of have already been answered
All right, okay.
or asked.
All right, okay, thank you.
No doubt
Audrey.
we'll think of something else.
Oh, you can come back anytime. Audrey.
Thank you. I suppose, can I just I'll get my paper up with a question. It was under the service design. We've since had a chat about it, but the free garden waste collection, that was a bit of a surprise, but I understand that that's a government agenda. And I suppose along those lines, I've circulated a recommendation to possibly look at the feasibility or the cost or, you know, the implications of having a free bulk waste collection. And I know we've talked about supply and demand and things like that, but I just wondered if it is possible when we're looking at it as another issue for consideration, as other boroughs do it. It isn't sort of widespread, but I thought maybe it'd be something worth looking into. The other thing was under service design, we've got about one of the points on deliver the service in-house, possibly in partnership with other councils. And one of the negatives was the increased costs on sick pay and pensions. I just, you know, I know that it is a cost, but would that not be a motivational factor if people, you know, if we were in danger of losing our drivers and things, to give them a decent, you know, decent terms and conditions, and maybe there was some payoff in that. Yeah, and I thought the idea, the issue for consideration, the last one about merging all those services, I thought that was quite an important one. I thought, you know, the fly tipping, the gully cleaning, and the bulk waste might be worth looking into. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take that, Andrew or Zora? Does it require an answer? Or just that you're going to look at it when you do the contract?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've had discussion before about the bulky collection stuff, and really the only difference between a bulky collection and fly tipping is that people pay for a bulky collection. You know, fly tipping is basically an illegal activity that's not paid for. You know, and so there are ways for us to maybe look at how we might package those two things together to, you know, obviously maybe we want less fly tipping because of its environmental impact, but at the end of the day, we want to recover that material. And again, Councillor Smith has raised this before, try and recover it in good condition, because that makes it far easier for it to be reused. And I think there are certainly opportunities we've discussed at officer level to do that and better in the future. And on the cost issue, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is that issue. I think all I'm pointing out there is that obviously access to things like the local government pension scheme bring with them significant employer contribution rates that up the cost. But at the end of the day, that's a decision for members how much money they want to put into the new contract.
Could I just come back, Chair?
Yeah, of course you can, yeah.
It's the recommendation, and the thing that I'm most focused on is the point around equality and people being able to access bulk waste collections on a low income if they cannot use the tip. And my original sort of query that we started maybe 2 years ago, Andrew, I'm sorry about that, it's gone on a bit, was around giving people without cars access to a free bulky waste collection. But the recommendation is to just ask if it's possible to look at it under a consideration as a one-off free bulky waste collection when you're doing the new contract, to see if it sort of cost benefit against the fly tipping. And I realise that there's loads of other factors that would come into that, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Just before I move back to Regan, could I ask a question just about how these contracts are structured in terms of flexibility? I mean, I know doing a contract for 8 years is quite a long time, and you can't cover all the eventualities, but initially we didn't collect a lot of cardboard. And now you see cardboard everywhere. So that's obviously increased in the last few years. And then we've had there's Amazon taking over from the retail market and stuff like that. When we do these contracts, how much flexibility do we actually build in? For example, as raised earlier, let's just say we're asked to start recycling the bigger plastic stuff, toys and packing cases and the harder stuff, because at the moment that goes in landfill as far as I'm aware. If we suddenly decided to do that, is this contract flexible so that we pay more or pay less if things move? Or how do we cater for eventual, well, like COVID, for example? I mean, that wasn't budgeted for, was it? And the extra collections because of that. Is this the kind of thing that's built into a contract initially? A contingency sort of figures.
Yeah, the answer to that, Councillor Caffrey, is that in terms of the current contract, it's built in to the extent that there are variations that can be agreed by both parties. And that's what we did during COVID. And, I think we've done several variations throughout the life of the contract. But it does need the consent of both parties. Because obviously you start off at day one and you say, okay, this is what we're going to deliver for you, and this is what we're going to cost. We're going to charge you for that. But, there are often parameters where it'll say, we can, if both parties agree, look at varying that. Often there will be an additional cost, but we do try and get as much flexibility as we can. But again, it's a trade-off. As a client, you want the most open-ended, flexible contract that you can. But as a contractor, you don't necessarily want that. So it's about getting that middle ground. But we do have that option to negotiate those contract variations.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Regan, back to you. You had some more questions, I think.
Sorry, can I let Guy go before me? I think he's actually before me, and then I'm quite happy to pass to Paul Bellinger first before me.
It's all right. Guy and Paul are on the top of my screen. I can't see above their eyes, so if they got their hands up, I didn't know. Sorry about that. Guy, do you want to go first? Then Paul, can you follow that?
Yeah, I'll be quite brief. I just want to be clear on my opinion on this various collections. I think the food waste weekly is obviously essential, especially in the summer, if you don't want outbreaks of maggots and rats unnecessarily. As regards the other two types of collations, the general and the other one, I think every fortnight would be acceptable. I don't agree with any 3 weekly collections. I think that's not good enough. After all, our residents do pay a lot of money for our council tax, and they deserve a decent waste collection, being one of the fundamental services the council has to provide. So yeah, a weekly food waste and 2 weekly for the other 2 types of collection, I would feel are adequate. Okay.
Thank you for that. Paul?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll try not to spend too much time on this. I know how frustrating most members are with the current situation, but we'll learn from the current situation to ensure that what we do in future is actually better. I think what we need to do as well is we need to really future-proof our contracts with sewers in future, and to make sure it's not a case of the tail wagging the dog, but the dog wagging the tail. It's us that pay them. We've paid them in September £625,220.90. That's a lot of money. That's just September. So we're talking average about £500,000 a month, maybe, for collection. Sewers then, sell that recycling. They roughly get about £100 a tonne as well for what they recycle, depending on how clean it is. So we've got to make sure that at the end of the day, it's about us. It's us as an authority, because at the end of the day, it's our constituents that pay, although it's 5 pence in every pound for the recycling doing, but it's to our constituents' benefit. So we need to put in there, in that caveat, a way of looking back at clawing back finances as well, because recently there's been a case of drivers not being paid because they've not had the drivers there. So in that contract, we need to look at it. If we're paying sewers a certain amount of money and they're making savings, can those savings come back to us as an authority or to our constituents in some way? Looking at the end of lane collections, which is in that list, that would be a serious no for me. I mean, recently we had a petition where we had, I think, about 1,600 signatures, maybe more than that actually, from people who did not want to go to a 3-week collection or collections to the end of their track, because there is a lot of elderly people, vulnerable people who live off the beaten track and would have to possibly walk their wheelie bin or recycling quite a distance to the
Well,
road.
Paul, can I just ask you why was petitioned for 3 weekly recycling when we haven't actually got to that stage? I don't quite follow that.
That's in the list on page 7.
No. That's a proposal. It's not policy yet, is it?
No, it's not policy yet. But what I'm saying that's an idea. But what I'm saying is, I would be against that idea.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
For that particular reason, Chair. So I would, I'd be against that one. With regards the stopping of the spillages from out of the vehicles, I've seen it where obviously the doors on both sides have been open and wind blows it straight through. Now, I've mentioned this to our waste and recycling managers that why don't they look at some sort of thin plastic flaps on those openings that can actually just come shut by a bit of a magnet at the bottom. So when they push the containers in, they open up, but then come back down again to stop stuff from blowing out. That could be a simple and cheap enough fix. And again, by what Councillor Courtney said about looking at other authorities as well, what they're doing better than us, learn from best practice. I think if we did go to a 2 weekly collection, we would definitely need to change the size of our recycling containers, because at the moment in time, they are only geared up for weekly collections, to be quite honest. I mean, it's great that Calderdale wants to be the best borough in the north, and one of the things we strive on is having a weekly recycling collection. I'd like to see that continue, but obviously when there's situations like there is now, who knows if that's going to come back up again in future, that we then go to a 2 weekly collection. But we have to ensure that communication and consistency is there, and that is something that I think needs to be put into a contract between Suez and us, that they ensure that the constituents of Calderdale are kept up to date with when and why and how things are happening, because that's where we've sort of like come unstuck a little bit recently. So that needs to be stipulated strongly in a contract. So I think I've made possibly some valid points there, actually, and I think I'll give up at this moment, Chair, but I think I've covered as much as I can at this moment in time.
So what you're questioning, and not without good reason, is the management of the contract rather than the contract itself. Is that where you've got the problem?
I think in a way, yes. I mean, there's a contract there. Obviously, with any contract, you've got a service level agreement in place. Yeah. We've got to ensure as an authority, because the contract's it's binding between two people at the end of the day. If we don't, if one person doesn't, live up to that contract, then there's a breach in that contract. Now, we've got to ensure that they'll probably be looking to make sure that we're fulfilling our side of the contract with regards to our payments to them. We need to be doing the same as an authority by ensuring that they also live up to their part of the contract as well. And if not, we need to be able to hold them to account and say, right, you have not fulfilled your half of this contract. And in that, there's got to be some sort of caveat in place for us to claw something back from them.
Yeah, you're quite right. That's too sad. I mean, Zora or Andrew, do you want to take that one? It's quite an important point, actually, because, we know Suez do it all, the collecting, but, I mean, we have to look at our side of the way the contract's managed from this side as well, I think. It's not unreasonable to ask that, is it?
I think if I can come in there.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think firstly, and just to make it absolutely clear, that there's no, at this point in time, when we'll go out for a new contract, that doesn't mean it's going to be Suez that gets it. So it could be a new contract provider. And then in terms of the overall contract management, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we have a good operational relationship with Suez. I think that we've worked really hard together. I think that there have been unprecedented challenges in terms of the HGV driver shortage, which is a national problem, the various tax changes that have come into force. But we've done a lot of work with Suez to actually recover that position. And we're hopeful that we've got a number of new drivers that will be qualified and driving soon, so that we'll start to put those remedies in place. And we've done that in a partnership approach. And I think Councillor Bellinger knows as well as I do. The crews on the ground are actually doing a really good job, and it'd be very, very difficult. And and all that good motivation's there. And some of the things that are happening are really out with Suez's control and out with our control. What we want to do is actually work together in partnership to actually get back to the point where we're delivering the service that we all want to deliver together to the residents of the borough.
Yep.
Can
Okay.
I come back in there, Chair, briefly?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Briefly.
I think one of the things we need to look at there is what we've currently got at the moment is Suez, I'm just saying hypothetically, are working on probably 80% of their resources. The 80% of their resources is trying to fulfill 100% of our recycling within Calderdale. That's the weekly 100%. Whereas if at the moment something like this happened in future, if they went down to sort of like 50% 1 week, 50% the other week, so that's your 2-week recycling, you've still got 80% covering 50% rather than 80% trying to cover 100%. And that will obviously make things a lot easier in future. That's just sort of like future proofing, really.
Okay. Thanks for that, Paul. I've got 4 hands up. We've got about 10 minutes left. So can I go to Regan for your question? You've been waiting a while.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Peter. Just a very quick point in support of what Andrew was saying about commingling. Yeah, I mean, Kirklees, for example, don't commingle with their food or the glass as a consequence, stuff like that. I would very much hesitate to offer the option of bringing the service back in-house. I mean, I would have thought that pensions and sick pay would have been handled within the Suez contract for their relationship with their own employees, I would have thought. I suppose the Suez having that flexibility in terms of the wage offering to respond to, for example, an HGV shortage, HGV licensed driver shortage by offering higher wages to both retain and recruit staff. The main beef, of course, at the moment is the missed collections that are going around, and there's no particular sign that that's going to ease any time, especially soon. I think communication is going to be very important on this one, and it would be great if we could see somehow or another, if it was done on a graphic, say, or somehow or another on the Calderdale website, those streets which have missed their collections. The promise of return within 24 hours is often not kept, quite frankly. Paul referred to it in council as the hokey cokey, the recycling hokey cokey. And he's got a very strong point on that. And it's not just about whether it's the weekly collection, but if it's missed, whether it's going to be reserviced in 24 hours. And I can't remember the last time that did happen, to be quite honest with you. Communication is therefore going to be absolutely key. And communication is something that we keep coming back to across different strands of this council in terms of what is something we're not very good at it. It needs to improve, I'm sure of it. So that residents can, with a degree of reliability, know that stuff is going to be collected or not, and they can make plans for that if it's not going to be collected. Therefore, if we are going to have a situation where the service isn't going to be 100%, it needs to be done on a rota basis, surely, so that there are going to be weeks where people can reliably put their stuff out for week-on-week collection and then receive some kind of message that this week we're not going to be able to make it to my street, Camp Street, and therefore you can plan for that and not have your stuff outside unnecessarily waiting on the pavement for that 24-hour later visit, which just ain't going to happen.
I think, Andrew, you've got the message on this one, have you? About communication. Sorry, Greg, we haven't got much time left. I'm trying to keep it a bit shorter.
Yeah, just one very, very quick last point. I would suggest lidded bins. I mean, I use actually old header tanks for most of my recycling. I never got them when I moved in here. I use header tanks, and it tends to keep it mostly in. Be even better if they were lidded as well, not unlike the food waste ones. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Steph, did you have a hand up again? I can't see the top of the screen.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to give just a few how I agree with things. I don't think we should maintain the weekly food. I think that's a given, and fortnightly for maybe other recycling. I think the main thing about the service for our constituents is to have consistency of the service. So whichever schedule does that best is the way to do it, I suppose, really. And as for commingling, I don't think that should happen. I think there's quite I might be a bit sad, but I like separating my waste into different little boxes and bags and things. And I'm not sure about how a free garden waste collection would work. Would you supply free green bins to everyone with a garden? How would that work? I mean, to make it more cost effective, how would that work?
Do you want to very, very quickly give you some idea of how that would work, Andrew, or Zora, who wants to take it?
Just very quickly, it would be, as Councillor Clark described, it would be tremendously costly, and this is one of the things that's worrying authorities that don't do it already. If it does become a national requirement, we're going to have to get a load of containers. We currently have one wagon that services around 5,000 properties. If we were doing it for, I don't know how many houses have got gardens, but 60,000, it's going to be 12 times the cost it is already.
Well, I get all that. Yeah, I sympathise with you on that one. Was that it, Steph, from you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one way that you could do it is have a sort of a street green collection bin, you know, where everyone on the street goes and puts their waste into a big bin. Maybe that might be less costly. I don't know. It doesn't seem to work, but as you say, it might be statutory.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Audrey, is your hand up again, or is it an old one?
No, I was going to just ask, a few people have made comments about looking at what worked well, and you did say that the 3 weekly refuse collection worked quite well. I mean, I don't know what people find to throw away, to be honest, because my bag's quite empty. But I was just thinking about the collection at the end of lanes. You can get assistance because they do it in Dorset, and you know you have to trundle it to the end of your lane, but you can ask for assistance. So I don't think that that's something that I'm totally opposed to. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just got a very quick one. Sorry, I've had my hand up for a while.
Sorry.
Chair, is that all right? Yeah, I just really want
to hand. That's all. Yeah.
Sorry. I just really wanted to say something. I think I can't remember if it was Councillor Beach or someone else said something about the fact that people pay. Obviously, yes, we all pay our council tax, and our residents pay their council tax. But if waste is 5% of the sort of council tax spend, or recycling and waste is 5%. That's compared to the spends for social care, it's a very small percentage. It's a really, really important part, and it's one of the main interfaces that our residents have with the council, and I totally get that. It's not one of the major spends. I just wanted to make sure that was really clear, and actually it's our job as councillors to make sure that our residents know that it's really important. It's like, yes, it's an important service, and yes, we all rely on it, and yes, it's it's vital, but actually it's not the biggest spend percentage wise that we have, and that's our job to make sure that all our residents and all the people that we represent that know that. So I just wanted to sort of add that, because people say, well, what do you do apart from collect the bin? People collect rubbish, but well, there's a massive amount of things, and rubbish is a very small percentage of it.
I suspect on the top of the complaints list, this has been fairly near the top for the last couple of months. I'm probably guessing at that, but I suspect it takes a lot of management time up and a lot of everybody else's time up as well. So obviously doing a new contract, we want to get it right. Is that about right? And Sarah, Andrew, how much time did it take up complaints? Is it quite cumbersome?
Things have been a bit difficult recently, but it's not just the waste service. I think somehow I have a range of services that I get complaints and demands for service on. But yes, clearly we want to get it right. If I'm just very quickly, that service reliability issue that Councillor Clark mentioned, I've really stressed that to the consultants, that in the evaluation of options, how easy it is to guarantee service reliability from an option. I think an option that is really great in many other ways, but we can't actually guarantee is going to be reliable, is not something we would necessarily want to see in Calderdale. But again, it's that trade-off, and that's the sort of difficulties that we're going to face over the next year.
Yeah, okay. Jenny, have you got your hand up? I can't on my screen. Is it up? Right, okay, thank you.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yes, I'm just conscious of the time, and so I wondered if I could just come in. I
think you're last anyway, so.
I was going to say, I wondered if I could just come in as a portfolio holder for public services, just to say big thank you to Scrutiny. I've been making lots of notes. I think it's been really, really useful. I mean, actually, it was really interesting that the first note I made was from Reagan, who talked about, you know, his commitment, his support for high rates of recycling and so on, but also said, and I've really noted this down because I hope Andrew will pass it on, that he finds the teams always friendly and courteous. And I just think that at a time when there have been complaints, and some people will take to social media and everything, basically have a go at sewers and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, that can sometimes have a washback on the ordinary workers that do the job, and they do their best. And so I thank you for that comment, Reagan. But the main thing I just wanted to say was I found this really useful, and I think it's kind of like the start of the process of us trying to think about over the next year, evaluate what the consultants that RAP have commissioned for us will come back with about best practice in other places, and then obviously we'll be kind of trying to circulate this. I hope very much as well that you know, that it'll be a kind of, that we'll be able to take everybody from across the political divides with us. I mean, I'm conscious that the last contract in 2016 was, you know, the Labour group wasn't in full control of the council, and in fact I think there was a sort of joint working party that involved Councillor Batty, Councillor Collins and Councillor Scott Benton, now an MP of course, who actually agreed the last contract. So in a way that was we were in a different sort of situation then. So we're quite happy to take responsibility for developing this, but we want to do it in partnership and learning from the opinion of members. So thank you very much for this discussion. I've really enjoyed it. I've taken a lot of notes. I know Andrew and Zora will have done likewise, and it will inform us, and I'm sure we'll be back again to place before too long to kind of let you know how we're getting on. But thank you.
That's fine. Can I just ask? This is quite a useful platform, really, for getting ideas, isn't it? What's the process for doing the contract, either Zora or Andrew? Will there be some more councillor involvement or public involvement? How are we going to do it? Is it done on a sort of consultation basis, or is it done sort of on a desktop?
I mean, we'll be looking to. I think there's a time a bit of a process in the report on the timeline. Which is useful, yeah. Yeah, essentially what will happen over the next year is, once we've got the report, we've had a look at the options. CircuLogic have done all their number crunching, there's huge spreadsheets, all that sort of stuff. We'll come up with some options, which obviously we'll be discussing with Cabinet. There'll then be an opportunity to sort of test those options, not just with members, but I'd also like to see us using some, I know it's not a popular expression, but focus groups or some other method of consultation to see how things would go down with local people. That's the sort of thing that I'd like to see happen over the next year, that we get people, you know, involved in the process in trying to design a service that will work in Calderdale, will deliver what the council wants, will deliver what the community wants. But ultimately, obviously, you know, it's up to the council and Cabinet in particular to decide what that will be once they've got all that input from people. And that's the sort of process that we want to see over the next 12 months or so.
Okay, right, thanks for that. Well, thanks everybody. I can't see his hands up. So that's been very useful.
Chair, I think Mike wants to speak. I think his hand.
Oh, Mike, beg pardon, Mike. Where are you?
Sorry, very, very quickly, Chair. I don't normally enter these debates, but one thing that's been discussed about other contracts, and I know has been discussed in other councils, is including a requirement within the contract, if we have a contract, if it's not all in-house, but if we have a contract, that the provider is asked to come to a scrutiny board from time to time to talk to members about the contract. And I think that's something that, you know, I'll just put up there that Zora and Andrew may want to consider. And the only other thing I wanted to say is Councillor Smith asked me to put the recommendation in track chats that she previously circulated. And I don't know whether she wants to move that formally before you finish it, or whether she just wants it to be there for people to read. So that's.
Do you want it formally? Do you want it formally noted, Audrey, or do you want to just let them, you know, pass it over and let them consider it with the contract negotiations?
No, I'd just like to note it formally, please.
Yeah.
I'd
Okay.
like to move it formally.
Right. I'm not. Do we need to vote on that or anything, or just can you just note it, Kirsty? Oh no, who's doing the minutes? Yeah.
Sorry, it's Diane. No, it's you've noted the report, you've noted all the comments and everything made.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything else extra to do. All the notes have been taken.
Right. Okay, that's fine. So right, as long as it's recorded that it's been taken. Thank you. Well, thanks for everybody. If we're okay now, we'll move on to the next item, which is the housing strategy and social housing review update. I'm not sure who's leading on this. Is it Heidi?
It is, Councillor, if that's okay. I have done a presentation for Zana. I don't know if you or Diane have the slides or whether you want me to share my screen and bring them up myself.
It's up to you, Heidi. You can, we've enabled share screen, so if you want to share, you can share. I don't mind doing it.
No, it's okay, I can do that.
Okay.
Heidi, what I'm going to do is let you run through this, and then I'll take questions at the end. Is that okay?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
And just to reassure members, I will go through my slides as quickly as I can because I know that you will want to get to questions. So thank you, first of all, for looking at this issue tonight. Myself and David Greenfield from the Housing Strategy and Growth team is also here tonight, and also our new apprentice, Tom, has joined us as well. So just to take you quickly through some of the context and background, as some colleagues may be aware, the new West Yorkshire Mayor has set a number of pledges, and one of them is specifically around homes and building new homes, and this covers the whole of West Yorkshire, but clearly there is a real commitment to ensuring that building sustainable and affordable homes is a key piece of the Mayor's work moving forward. And there's a great deal of work that's been done on a West Yorkshire basis, and we link into this through WICA. A number of West Yorkshire based housing associations have set up a West Yorkshire Housing Partnership. The aim of the group really is to make sure that housing has a very strong voice in terms of working with the Mayor on a regional basis. And they've been working with other partners to develop a West Yorkshire pipeline of housing delivery. This isn't just housing association development, but it includes lots of other partners, but it shows the strength that there is around new housing development across West Yorkshire. There's been a number of funding opportunities available, and we've made sure that Calderdale have made the most of those opportunities. And we're also working very closely with both WICA and Homes England around home ownership, building new homes in Calderdale. And one of the things that we've been looking at more locally is something called First Homes, which is a new form of affordable housing. And we're looking at how that might work in Calderdale for us as well. So just on the screen now are the ambitions that we've set out within the housing strategy. And I aim to go through each of these in a bit more detail. One of the things that we wanted to focus on was homelessness and rough sleeping. We have produced this year a separate homelessness and rough sleeping strategy that was signed off by Cabinet. And it looks about how do we develop pathways and support for people who are homeless, or more importantly, those that are at risk of homelessness. One of the things that Calderdale is very good at is ensuring that we try and prevent homelessness wherever possible. And we have been working very closely with colleagues across the council and external partners to look at how we implement the findings of the Burnt Bridges report, which was a review of the death of 5 men over a short period of time in 2019. So one of the things that we've done on the back of that is to develop a pathway for rough sleepers that ensures that there are a number of different options to support them to come off the street. We have a winter shelter that has opened this year. We have a new service called Craven Mount, which is intensive 24/7 supported accommodation, and then 17 move-on properties for people. So we're really starting to make a big difference, and our rough sleeping numbers, because they're very small, do tend to go up and down a little bit, but at our last count we just had 3 people that we believed were sleeping that particular night on the street. Just moving on to the private rented sector, it's a really significant and important sector within Calderdale. And one of the things we'd really like to do with our new strategy is to look at how we work more closely with the sector, and particularly with private landlords. We're currently recruiting a landlord liaison officer, and the aim of that is to really try and develop and enhance the relationships that we have with landlords, to try and give them advice and support. And the reason for that is to really try and improve standards within the sector, promote best practice, and really try and stop any evictions from taking place wherever possible. We accept that sometimes that is necessary, but really trying to work with private landlords more effectively, but also where we do have issues with landlords who are providing poor quality accommodation or behaving in a way that isn't appropriate, then we want to look at our enforcement response and make sure that we are supporting residents who are in that poor quality accommodation. Building new homes is a real important priority for us. And so we've been looking at how we bring forward new housing schemes in Calderdale. We have a number of schemes that are listed there, but we also have a number of other schemes that aren't on there. So, for example, we're currently out to tender on a project to deliver 300 new homes in North Halifax on 3 different council-owned sites in North Halifax. And myself and the team have been working really closely with private developers to try and get them to work with us and to deliver and build new homes in Calderdale. And that's starting to have a real impact. One of the biggest sites that is in our local plan has had interest and is actually being brought forward through the planning process through a discussion that we had with a developer to talk about opportunities in Calderdale. So it's really starting to have an impact. And obviously affordable housing is still an important part of what we want to do in Calderdale. And we have over 300 units, not including the work that we've been doing with Together Housing. So 300 affordable units in our programme, plus another 260 that are planned or on site with Together Housing. Mentioned North Halifax, these 3 sites are really key for us in terms of bringing new homes forward in the North Halifax area. And one of the things that we'd like to see delivered on this scheme is an extra care facility. And it would be something that perhaps is a little bit different in that it would be age neutral. And the reason for that is that we recognise that sometimes there are people who are slightly younger that require an extra care type service, or we know that there are older people who still care for their children, adult children, who would benefit from that type of scheme. So we're looking at trying to develop what we feel it would be an age-friendly and sustainable neighbourhood in the north of Halifax. And as I say, that's out to tender at the moment. And then just finally, the social housing review was undertaken by Scrutiny a couple of years ago. And so I just wanted to take members through where we had got to with some of the recommendations that came out of that review. I think it's fair to say that we've moved on quite a bit from where we were to where we are now. So some of these things we've kind of moved on a little bit. So looking at, for example, number one, at the social housing demand and making sure it matches to development, that has really been picked up through work we've been doing on the local plan, but also work that has been done through our lettings review that we did earlier this year, to really make sure that we're building housing in the right places, and that will continue moving forward as the local plan is in place. Recommendation number 2, developing a social housing development prospectus to identify what property was needed in each area. Again, I think that has been superseded by the local plan and some of the work that was undertaken there. But we do continue to have discussions with our registered providers, our housing associations, to make sure that they understand where our housing need is and where the demand is greatest. Recommendation number 3, this was something that was very much actioned following the review, and we now make sure that on every scheme that we work on in terms of new development, we will identify and work with developers to identify how we can meet the needs of those people who require accessible homes. So that now does happen on a scheme by scheme basis. Recommendation 4 has been delayed. We've had other priorities, but it hasn't gone off the agenda. And I think with our new landlord liaison officer, that might be something that we can revisit at a later date. Recommendation number 5, the demographics, again, that has been done through the local plan and other pieces of work that have happened. So, for example, the health and wellbeing strategy that's being worked on at the moment looks at some of that. And we also do look at it on a scheme by scheme basis. And then finally, action number 6, sorry, was around tenant engagement. And this was actually a slightly separate piece of work that was done. And I'm just going to stop sharing because I think it'll be helpful for us to see each other, because that was the end of my slides. So this piece of work has actually moved forward quite a bit, and we've spoken to a couple of the organisations that were involved in the review back in 2019 to talk about how they feel things have moved on around tenant engagement. And one was Connect, who only have a small number of properties, relatively speaking, in Calderdale, but they told us about some of the activity that they've done. Just as an example, they work with the Community Land Trust on a very small scheme in Walsden, but even so, they hosted a get-together for the residents there to talk about what improvements they might like to see implemented moving forward, and it included things like outside lighting, water butts, adaptations, those kinds of things. So they're very active and wanting to speak to their tenants. On the other end of the scale, Together Housing, they've got quite a few different things that they do with their residents. And what I will do is send some information that I've received from them to colleagues in committee section so that it can be shared with members for you to look at yourselves. But they have a residents charter that sets out how they will work with their tenants and residents, and also provides feedback to them about the level of whether they feel that Together are doing a good job or not. They look at things like accountability, resident engagement strategies, and they have scrutiny panels where they do an in-depth review about pieces of work. They issue a quarterly newsletter that talks about you said, we did, giving feedback to residents. And they also do an annual report, but they've also got lots of other things that I'm not going to go into detail, but things like providing small scale community grants so people can do work within their own communities. And just one example of a piece of work that they've recently done around building safety was they had a panel of residents, and they were involved in the recruitment of a new building safety manager. And they also have been actively involved in drafting a residents' engagement strategy for building safety. So really wanting to hear the tenant's voice within the work that they do. So I'm now happy to take any questions that members may have, but hopefully that's just giving you a feel for the work that we've been doing within the service. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Heidi. That's very good, very informative. Those recommendations, it's a while since we did this. Is that the ones from the social housing review that we did into? Is that the one is that what you're working on? I'm delighted, and I'm sure Jenny will be, that you're actually working on recommendations.
Of course.
I couldn't know exactly what they were, but they made it all worthwhile that we've done that report now. Yeah, it's great. It's nice to have a document that's actually been worked on, though, isn't it, rather than on the shelf. So remember that. And where's that Burke's Court? That last slide.
Burke's Court is in Walsden.
That
So
looks
it's just
lovely.
a small scheme of bungalows.
Yeah, it was really nice. That could live there myself. Yeah. Right. Sorry about that. I digressed. Really just open to questions. I can't see anybody waving. Is everybody happy? And
I think Councillor
hang on. Paul's waving. Sorry, on this iPad's not big enough. I can't. Your head's a bit. Yeah, I've got half your head. I can't see above that. So that's just on the top 3 people.
Yeah.
So sorry about that, Paul. You want to fire off?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, just thank you for that report. It's really interesting, actually. Quite a lot of work taking place there as well, by the looks of things. I've got a couple of points or a couple of questions I need to ask. One is, where does Weave, our own development company, fit into this? Because at the end of the day, obviously, you know, if we can find sites for Weave to develop on, it's in our best interest as a commercialisation scheme, you know, to generate income from supplying houses ourselves. And then the other question I've got as well is regarding the homelessness. Homelessness comes in very many forms. You know, people that are drug dependent, alcohol dependent, got into a bad relationship and ended up on the streets. Women that have probably been in a violent relationship and had to leave home suddenly with children. So, you know, it's not a case of one size fits all when it comes to accommodation for them. What is there actually in place to ensure that there is the levels of vulnerability within people are not within the same building? So you wouldn't potentially put a young woman child who's escaped a violent relationship into a shared property with, you know, alcohol or drug dependent people. What's in place to ensure that doesn't happen? So they're my 2 points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did I come back on that, Heidi?
Am I okay to come back, Chair?
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
So first of all, Weave Homes, we're looking at a number of sites that we have in Calderdale, but as with many sites in Calderdale, they have had their challenges, but you're absolutely right. Weave Homes is a real opportunity, I believe, to deliver housing in Calderdale. We just have to identify where those places are. So it also, the work of Weave Homes doesn't sit within my service area. It does sit with another of my colleagues, but we work very closely together to talk about different sites and opportunities. So you're quite right, that is a tool in our box, if you like, in terms of being able to deliver housing in Calderdale. In terms of homelessness accommodation, as I mentioned in my presentation, wherever possible, we would try and prevent somebody becoming homeless. So just as an example, we have something called the Sanctuary Scheme that would support, usually it would be a woman to remain in a home, but men also experience violence within relationships. So it would be ensuring that the person that has experienced domestic abuse is supported to remain safely in the home if they're able to. But we also have a whole range of accommodations. So we have a women's refuge that is for women and families. We have our winter shelter that operates 6 months of the year. I have Ryburn House, which is temporary accommodation. And then we also have a number of dispersed properties. So you're absolutely right. There are some client groups that we would not want to put together, and we have a strong approach to safeguarding all of the people that we work with. So that was why the development of the rough sleeper pathway was also very important. So I think we do have a real range of accommodation options for people, but it is only a relatively small number because we do so well on that prevention work.
Thank you for that. I can't see which order the hands went up in, so I'll just go in the order I can see them. Is that all right? Steph.
Thank you, Chair. Together Housing have recently disbanded the local panel. Now, the local panel there had 2 nominated councillors on that panel, and otherwise it was residents and housing officers, etc. How do they now engage in the We Listened, We Did scheme? That worries me. And also, how does the council have contact with Together Housing now that has been disbanded? Is there something else in place?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, we do have a number of routes in which we liaise with all of our housing association partners that Together are a part of. So as an example, we have a strategic group of senior officers from the different registered providers that we work with, and Together sit on that. And we also have a more operational group of officers from the different housing association partners we work with. We have a safeguarding group that meets so we can share good practice around any of the safeguarding reviews that have been undertaken in Calderdale. But specifically with Together Housing, we do have separate meetings with them. You may be aware that we have the Calderdale and Together Housing Investment Partnership. So only today we had one of our meetings where we go through all the different schemes that we're working on, but we also have wider strategic discussions around what Together Housing are doing and what Calderdale Council are doing and how we can be involved. But also Together Housing get involved at a strategic level on much broader pieces of work. So just as an example, one of the colleagues from Together Housing sits on the Gold group that deals with any of the crises that we deal with. So for example, the recent Storm Arwen that we had, Together Housing were directly involved over that weekend in responding to concerns and issues that were raised with them. But not only that, because the council was struggling to get hold of another housing association, Together Housing spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone that weekend using their contacts to try and get through and get a message to the organisation that we couldn't get hold of. So they're involved in lots of different things. They sit on lots of different strategic groups. So we do have regular meetings, and the information that I will send you through about their tenant engagement will set out the different things that they have. So as I say, they have a resident engagement strategy, they have the scrutiny panels that they have where they look in depth at certain issues. So like the building safety panel was an example of how they get tenants directly involved in that, and they have a timeline that they've sent me that sets out the different pieces of engagement work that they will do with their residents over a year, and there is quite a lot of work involved in that. So I do feel that there are lots of opportunities to get involved. One of the things that councillors at Scrutiny might be interested in is perhaps us bringing along Together Housing to a future meeting so that they can talk about their work and their vision. They're very much interested in doing more place-based work in Calderdale, and very much looking at what we've done up at Beach Hill. So that might be something that Scrutiny might want to have, because they would be very happy to come along and talk to you and answer any questions that you have about their work.
Can I just come back on that just very briefly? What I'm concerned about is that there is no operational there are no councillors involved in anything operational, which previously there were. These members were nominated and approved at full council, so it wasn't a small panel that could just be disbanded, which it was, and that really concerns me.
Just to perhaps reassure you, Councillor Clark, Councillor Patient does sit on the Calderdale and Together Housing Investment Partnership meeting, so he attended this morning's meeting. He also attends the registered provider meeting that we have with the senior officers from all the different housing associations that we work at. So as our cabinet portfolio holder, he does sit on different groups and ensure that members' voice is given in through that route.
I still think it needs looking at. Thank you.
Thank you for that. When I was chair of Pennine Housing, we had 5 resident groups. Just thought I'd throw that in. Sarah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so thanks for that presentation, Heidi. It was really interesting and far-reaching, except travellers. There was nothing on there about travellers. Now, I don't know if your remit covers travellers or people, who like a more peripatetic lifestyle. And it is our legal requirement to provide a traveller site in Calderdale, as the same with every local authority in the country. And it's something that we've failed on so far. So that's my sort of like first question, really, is that. And then secondly, I suppose again, it's a little bit, I'm obviously having a bit of a ranty day, so I do apologise that you've got me on place on a ranty day. But it's again, it's sort of like it's just as councillors, we need to be, I think, aware that, I think we're all aware about the planning situation and the fact that we haven't done very well in our housing delivery, in terms of the UK, in terms of the local authority. We've done quite poorly, and we're in danger of losing our, my understanding from the briefing that Robin gave us a few months ago, Robin Tuddenham, was that if we don't improve on this, we could well lose all our sort of say in where some sites, houses are put, if we don't pull our finger out. So it's just, and I just remember this from being, I'm a sub on the planning committee, just that we need to be mindful when we're thinking, and when residents come to us again and talk to us about objecting to housing in our wards. I mean, I'd love it if we had some large areas that we could put housing on in the upper Calder Valley, because we really struggle for housing and we desperately need it. We desperately want, I would love for there to be some housing schemes and some places that we could put affordable housing in locally. And to be honest, I would feel quite comfortable defending that against all the people who, but the disruption and we don't want this. It's like, but we need housing, and if we don't approve things, we will lose control over what we can do. So sorry for that little bit of rant there, but I suppose the main thing that I want to say is about, just about travellers. So where do travellers and the fact that we need a traveller site fit into this? I mean, I do have a suggestion. It's going to be really unpopular, but I think, maybe if every single ward came up with one potential site in there, that we could offer in every single ward, and then one could be chosen from that, and that way it would be sort of very even. Evenly looked at. We could have all potentially take that. Anyway, so that's just my thought on that, please.
Thanks, Sarah. I won't take your last option forward at this meeting, so I'll pass that on to somebody else if that's all right. Heidi, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you. I have done some work on travellers previously, and a few years ago we looked at the housing needs of travellers across a West Yorkshire basis. But in terms of identifying sites, it wouldn't sit in my area, and I don't want to pass the buck to my colleague, Richard Seaman, but it would be something that probably would need a joint response in terms of looking at that. But absolutely support what you say about the need for a site in Calderdale. And I just have to say I agree about your rant. I'm quite happy for you to rant about the number of homes. It's something that I feel very passionately about, and I think I think it's very difficult sometimes for people to understand that to change the numbers of housing, it doesn't happen very quickly. It takes time to go identifying sites, going through planning processes, the building process, etc. But we have a lot of homes in that pipeline, and we're really working proactively as a service now to bring forward those housing numbers. Previously, our focus was on affordable housing delivery, and we've always been quite strong on that. But when Sheila came in, she asked us to look at that broader housing delivery, and that's what we've done. And we've really, I think, seen a real difference in the numbers starting to come through. I think in my presentation, I said we had about 800 pre-applications, 800 homes in terms of those pre-applications. So I think we are starting to see a change, but you're absolutely right. We've got to start seeing housing as a positive thing and something that can bring benefits to communities, not a negative thing, because, you know, we all need somewhere to live, and, you know, our children and our families need places to live as well. So it is really important. I have noticed Sheila's put a hand up, so I'm just going to bring Sheila in, if that's okay, Catherine.
But I was going to ask where Sheila's disappeared to, but I saw she's gone to the top of the screen.
I'm hiding up here, Chair.
Sheila,
Good evening, everybody.
Can you just park that for a minute? Can I just bring Regan? We've got 10 minutes left. Can I bring Regan in and Audrey just ask the questions? Then possibly you could wrap up. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Thank you. Regan.
Right, thank you. I've got quite a few. 5,000 homes, is that across Wicker per annum? Is the first simple question. The second simple-ish question, the sites underway that you've mentioned on the presentation, are they currently on schedule for delivery? Which also ties in with the question about the railway bridge development in Rastrick, the railway bridge extra care building. Is that currently still on target for people to move in early 2022? The other question I have pertains to the development of surplus. I understand there might be a review of surplus office stock that the council owns, with potential for its conversion to apartments. And yes, I emphasize every single time I say this, dignified habitation for folk. The social housing aspects, there was some talk about about councils being allowed to develop their own land again for housing stock as council housing or social housing, whichever way you want to look at it. Is that still on the table? I mean, I haven't heard anything about that for a while, and I was wondering, with the land that we do still own that is still viable for development, are there any projects in mind for that? I mean, I was slightly mindful, for example, of the land at the top of oh gosh, the name escapes me now, of Claremont. That potentially could have been a site that, if that is the case, that the council could have developed rather than offloading it to Together Housing. Yes, are we allowed to make our own developments? Other questions are a bit more on the technical aspect with regard to the amounts of land being developed and the housing trajectories. There's an accusation that's the numbers being used are currently out of date, based on the 2018-19 trajectory rather than the 20 over the local plan period from 2032 to 33.
Which page are you on, Regan? Where's this?
Yeah, this is over and above, really. This is
is it this report? I mean, stop asking.
Is it actually in the report? That's, well, it might have been in the cabinet papers rather than actually directly on this report. Right. So perhaps, okay. So perhaps this particular section, those series of questions are a little bit more technical, aren't actually directly relevant on this particular occasion. So I'll pause there. You're talking at me a million miles a minute, and there's a few questions there for to be chewed over as well. So that'll be for starters. Thank you.
Andy, do you want to deal with those as briefly as you can?
Yeah. So the 5,000 homes, it's across the West Yorkshire region, and it's over the 3-year period of the Mayor. It isn't per annum. In terms of sites being on schedule, I would say generally yes, but with housing development, you never know until you get into the ground what you're going to find, and that can delay things. We've seen with Railway Bridge View that has been delayed significantly because of the pandemic and things like that. We are still looking at hopefully a sort of late winter, early spring opening for Railway Bridge View, but that very much depends on sort of the final snagging and getting things through, but that is still fairly on track in terms of when we want to see people moving in. In terms of office stock, we would look at any scheme or site and work with, whether that's a private developer who has an interest in it, whether it's a housing association. We would look at any opportunities that there were to bring forward housing schemes, so long as you say that they meet housing need and are of the standard that we would want to see in Calderdale. Yes, we can do council housing development. That was what we was set up for, but we do also have a commitment through the investment partnership that we have with Together Housing, which was why the site that I think you're referring to at Claremont went to Together Housing, because they will be able to deliver much quicker than we can, because they're already involved in development in terms of bringing that site forward. So I think I've probably covered most things. I'm not going to cover the trajectory in the local plan, because I think that's more a planning issue than solar housing, and I wouldn't want to step on Richard Seaman's toes.
I fully sympathise with that comment. I wouldn't want to get involved in that either. Who else was it? Audrey.
Yeah, thank you. Hi Heidi, thanks a lot. It was a really interesting report. I have to declare a pecuniary interest because I am a Together Housing tenant. I think that is the case. I suppose I've got a couple of things. Just a better understanding of social housing demand. I wonder, I realise that you've done a lot of work on that, and I know a lot of it has been really successful in terms of location, but I wonder if it's hit on this sort of a lot of Joseph Rowntree Foundation and other sort of researchers looked at social housing as providing reasonably cheap rent, reasonably conditioned housing, and security of tenure, and they are three things that are so important. And I wondered why Weave wasn't set up initially to provide rented accommodation instead of being set up to, you know, make houses for a profit. The other comment is probably a bit controversial. It's about Greenbelt. I think a lot of our Greenbelt doesn't have very much biodiversity value. I think we need to be looking, it's much more attractive to developers. We could be looking at developing those sites, and I think we need to be careful that if we are developing the Greenbelt, we need to make sure that there's social housing available. And I think, you know, if you've got a real need, you can prove there's a need, I think you can get round it. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm doing this from my very limited time on planning, but I do think that yeah, Greenbelt and places like the Upper Valley might be. Are they a possibility?
Before you answer that, I accept what you say about the Greenbelt and stuff and the local plan. But the Greenbelt debate is a separate matter really for local plan, and I'm not sure it's up to Heidi to decide policy of building on Greenbelt. When Sheila sums up, perhaps she'd like to mention it. And also something else that's been raised by Regan and Paul, I think, is, and you've raised it as well, is about Weave and what's happening at Weave. Because all I've had from Weave in the last 2 years is appointments have been cancelled and moved, and nothing seems to happen. So when you respond, Sheila, can you include that in your summing up? Do you mind?
I can.
Do you just take some of the points, Heidi, that Audrey's raised, but just forget about the Greenbelt bit, will you? Because it's a subject going all night. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So you're absolutely right about what social housing can deliver Councillor Smith, and I speak as someone that has formerly lived in together housing stock myself a number of years ago, and I know the benefits it can bring to people, and that's why we've always had a very strong affordable housing programme in Calderdale, and we continue to do so and work very closely with a range of partners on that. I'm afraid in terms of Weave Homes and why they weren't set up to deliver rented accommodation, I think there are lots of options for what Weave Homes could do, and they couldn't do everything, and so the decision was taken to build houses for sale initially, to try and establish it as a company and to get a solid financial foundation to which it could move on from, and that was a cabinet decision that was made at the time, but the option of looking at private rented and other models were considered at the time, but it was decided that that would be the model that would be looked at. But I think there has been a lot of work and discussion that's gone on since then, and I think possibly we're in a slightly different place from where we were. But as I say, it's possibly something that Sheila will want to cover when she does her summing up.
Okay, thanks for that. You've had a lot of questions there and done extremely well.
Yeah.
Sheila, can I ask you to just, so you're ready to sort of sum up and give us some ideas? And
I am, Chair. Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. There was quite a flurry of questions there from Councillor Dickinson, so it kind of took me by surprise. I've made a lot of notes that are a bit scribbly, I'm afraid. I would like to say that in the time I've been here, since the end of January, the work of the teams in housing and across planning and the joint work has been absolutely phenomenal. I can't praise highly enough the work that Heidi and the team have, both in terms of delivering those services to people in need, but in terms of developing the programmes around the delivery and supply around housing and the production of the strategies. So 2 strategies in the time I've been here, the homelessness and rough sleeping and the housing strategy, so tremendously productive area of the council. Just to pick up on a point Councillor Courtney made around traveller sites, that was one of the first questions I think I asked when I got here, was around the provision of traveller sites. Having come from Bradford, where we you know, as a near neighbour, we understood the sensitivities around providing traveller sites. It is something that will be done post the local plan being adopted in the next 12 months. And I have to say there is progress with the local plan. We have a hearing on the 11th of January, and we're hopeful that will be the final hearing. We'll be able to move forward then to make modifications and adoption of the local plan. So some really positive strides. Just to pick up on the point about Greenbelt, the principle around development is very much brownfield first, about bringing sites that have been previously developed into use and buildings that have previously been in use but are now disused. And so there's work Heidi and the team and colleagues are looking at around the town centres and so on. So it's brownfield, greenfield and then greenbelt. We would only take greenbelt as part of the local plan process when there's a requirement to meet the housing need. And that is exactly what's happening through the local plan process. And I just want to point out that local plan and planning is coming to this committee in February. I think we've got scheduled, so we'll be able to have a detailed conversation then about all of those issues. With regards to Weave Homes in particular, I think at the time it was set up, as Heidi's indicated, we were in a very different place around housing delivery, and government had very clear ambitions about the role of local authorities and housing companies in particular, about having freedoms and flexibilities to deliver. What I don't think was perhaps in the minds of government when those flexibilities were being discussed was some of the challenges that markets like Calderdale and a number of places, particularly in the north, face. And the reality is that if it was easy to deliver, the private sector would be doing it and making money. So we're really kind of dealing with some challenging sites, some very challenging issues. But I do think, as Heidi said, that there is a role for having that flexibility of having a company that gives us the opportunity to look at how we deliver. And some of that will be around the types and tenures of properties. So it's not just about market sale, but it could be about private rented sector and good provision private rented sector. And I think we need to move away from thinking that only social housing can be a good quality rented option. A good private rented option is a good option to have. And I think what we want through the housing strategy and the delivery through the work of the teams is to have that choice. because what communities need is choice about where they live, the types of houses they live in, and the types of communities they're based in. So I think that's all I've got to say, Chair, really. I'm happy to take any questions, but I'd like to thank the team for all the work they've done, but thank you as well. It's been very interesting listening to your questions and comments this evening.
It has, yeah, thanks very much. Anybody got any specific questions for Sheila? No. Well, thanks for somebody, it's useful.
Councillor Dickinson's waving.
Oh, right, sorry, yes. I didn't see it, Regan, sorry, your head's missing again.
Yeah, sorry about this. It's actually something I wanted to raise about the traveller site. I understand this. I don't know if it's a rumour or if it's more substantial than that they were considering a site down at Cooper Lane, which bizarrely it falls within Calderdale. It is more of an observation than a question, to be quite honest, because that struck me as actually potentially being not a bad place for it to be situated, notwithstanding the fact it's pretty low level down there close to the river.
Thank you.
Sorry, I wouldn't want to comment on individual sites, but I think it's important to note that in the same way as any other provision of housing, it's really important that we balance need and demand. So it's not just about where we would like to see the sites, it's about where travellers would want to be. And one of the benefits of providing sites is it does make a difference around those illegal encampments and where you have travellers that come and set up home for a temporary period of time in places that are not provided with the facilities that you need to support them. And it's a real public health issue, you know, access to doctors, access to education and so on. The best way to deal with this is to get a decent site in the right location with all the amenity that those people need. So I think that's something that we need to take forward in the new year when we've got a local plan in place.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Sheila. And thanks everybody. Again, another interesting debate and thanks for your participation. The last item tonight is the Cabinet priorities. Now, unfortunately, Scott Patient's not very well. So I see Jane has just flashed up in front of me there. Have you been hiding, Jane? Have you just appeared? So we presumably are you standing in for Scott, or is he just Jenny doing this?
No, I think it's just me and Jenny, Chair. I'm not very well either, so but I've struggled on. I think Sheila can field some of the housing related issues.
Well, all right, then I'll let Jenny kick off, and then you can join in as appropriate. So thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, right, Chair. Well, I'm really pleased that we've brought this to the panel. What we've tried to do is to give a kind of an honest assessment of how we've got on with our priorities, our Cabinet priorities for 6 months. And if you look at the report, the first few, which I think are really excellent and interesting, relate to education, and obviously that's Councillor Adam Wilkinson's area.
This section 4.2 you're referring to?
No, well, I'm referring to. I'm actually, to be honest, what I'm doing. The section, Chair, that I'm looking at is the actual table at the bottom of the report, which actually works through, which I thought might be, in some sense, possibly more interesting for people, where it says our priorities are to deliver a comprehensive education COVID recovery plan, and then our progress to date and achievements. And I thought perhaps it might feel that might be something which is kind of quite easy for people to kind of take, perhaps have a look at. That's what I was thinking doing. So the first section that looks at education and so on, and again, it would be interesting to have people's comments about that, really. But it also goes on to think about you know, what we want to do about becoming an age-friendly borough and so on, and you know, improving physical activity areas across all our communities via the active Calderdale. The area that particularly relates to I suppose public services and communities, which is my own portfolio, is in that section which is in blue. You know, promoting cycling as a sustainable and healthy activity, and I know that's one that Councillor Patient's been really interested in, and I know there's other people on the call that are quite keen cyclists as well. Our spring clean programme, you'll see, I've got to be honest with you, the spring clean programme became a summer clean programme. We didn't manage to deliver that until August, but we were really pleased that we had done, and I'd like to pay tribute to our volunteer coordinator. And for anybody that's interested, the winter and the winter solstice on the 21st of December, she's working alongside some community organisers, and we're having a dawn to dusk cleanup of Queen's Road in my own ward, which is absolutely brilliant. So so that's very much that objective was very much about trying to stimulate interest and a sense of ownership, really, in trying to keep our neighbourhoods clean, because we know that litter is something that really bugs us all. The other thing is that I think we're quite pleased about the we said we wanted to introduce a better customer reporting system for fly tipping, and I hope very much that members here have had good experiences of that. I've occasion quite frequently to report fly tipping, and it does seem to be easier now. You do get feedback. You don't need to spend time reporting it if it's indicated that it's already been reported. You can put it on the map and so on, and you get told when it's been cleaned up. And I'm told that the cleanups are happening more quickly. So it's not perfect. We've still got a long way to go, but we feel that, and we hope very much that people's experience of that is better. So I'd be really interested to hear about that and how people feel about it. Had Councillor Patient been here, he would have obviously been glad to hear, as I would be, how people feel about the council's response to climate emergency. And there's been quite a lot of work going on with that. Again, also on the kind of yellow section, I suppose it is. We've been doing quite a lot of work on community asset transfers, and I know there's some of the members on this call have got an interest in that. And there's a number of other areas that we said that we would try to get on with as best we could. And I know that Jane will probably want to talk about some of the other areas, particularly inclusive economy recovery plan and so on. So I'll stop there if I may, Chair. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Jane, before I throw it open, do you want to add anything specifically? You're on mute.
I wanted just to say something about the two things that particularly got my name against them. One, as Jenny says, is the inclusive recovery plan, and the other is the question of capital and spending capital. And I'm thinking about what am I most proud of, what's been the most challenging, and what's next really in terms of the capital, because this is a big thing for Calderdale Council. And I was going to start by saying I'm most proud of recruiting a very good director and a new assistant director, actually. That could just be sucking up to your staff. Sheila.
Oh, see, right.
Sheila and Kate. I didn't want to speak about individual buildings and schemes. They're in the paper, and I'm happy to take questions. I wanted to say something about the job that actually making sure that capital works for Calderdale is at the moment. And I think we've come to a really significant point in the whole capital programme, because actually what we're building for is the future. You know, lots of work was done in the 70s around Calderdale, lots and lots. And if you think about it, that's actually 50 years ago. So we're now into a whole round of capital spending, which will give us an infrastructure that will last hopefully for the next 50 years. And I think it's crucial, really. And it's important to emphasise that, you know, roads have to be dug up and closed from time to time, and traffic lights put in and so on. But actually, you do have to go through that pain in order to get the gain of having roads mended for the longer term and new structures put in. So I just wanted to say that. The other thing to say is that actually, in some ways, with the advent of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and now the new mayoral Combined Authority, in some ways, the job of working on our capital schemes has changed slightly, in that we have to basically, obviously, we've got the 5 local authorities in West Yorkshire, and we're fighting very politely, but we're still fighting for Calderdale's share of that. As the smallest council, we have to fight, I think, hardest and make sure that people know that we're there, we're in the picture, and we do good things, we deliver well, and we need to be in there fighting. I think we're also facing a very challenging climate. And again, it's different from before, when you'd basically bid in for money. This time it's competitive bidding. We've got to bid against other councils for all these various fragmented pots of money. And the rules for each are slightly different. And it does mean that our officers are having to, you know, change bids, means that we've got to have shovel-ready projects all the time. So often we've got to put officers onto working things up, ready for that next bid, and we don't know what it's going to be. The ridiculously short deadlines for these competitions, and then the same with the delivery. But that's the business we're in, and in Calderdale, we're really both politicians, all politicians cross-party, I should say, and officers are really working hard to make sure we're in that picture and at that table. What's next on capital? Deliver, deliver, deliver. That's the name of the game coming up. More of the same, but in looking forward for those schemes in the pipelines, we're looking at ways in which, because we're a small council, we can aggregate schemes. So we've got lots of little brownfield sites where mills were. Can we put them together and make a big scheme? Can we put together some of the outside our towns, our 6 market towns, other areas where we can put together a set of bids and make something that's got a critical mass? So that's really all I wanted to say on capital. It's not about the specific schemes, but about I wanted the committee to understand what the nature of the managing capital for this council was like at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that. For somebody who's not very well, you got that out very well and very fluently. Thank you. We've got a few minutes left, so anybody got any questions? Sheila, are you raising your hand there, Sheila?
Chair. Yeah, I did. Poor councillor patient is ill, but I did pester him to ask him. I didn't want to take the liberty of saying what I thought his priorities might be, but he did text me back. So do you mind if I just share those with you?
Please feel free.
It's I was going to say it's a short text, but it's actually quite a long text. So he's most proud of in the last 12 months the work that's been done on the emissions reduction pathway and how it's been adopted and taken up by members of the community, our partners, including Together Housing, health and wellbeing colleagues, and as part of the inclusive economy work. And the board that we had yesterday, I think, was a really fantastic example of a range of partners coming together and really engaging in what the climate emergency means for the borough. He's particularly pleased that we've got the lead for climate emergency across West Yorkshire and that we're helping to shape the Mayor's approach to delivering that. And that gives us a really strong hand and it puts the borough right at the heart of those conversations. And so Councillor Scullion talking about our role at West Yorkshire and being the smallest authority, we've actually got quite an important role to play. And I think one of the conversations I had with some partners on a call recently was about where Calderdale's positioned. And one of them had said, you know, Calderdale's always been the hole in the centre of the donut. And my response is we need to start being the jam in the centre of the donut. We're the really important, but we can make those connections, we can make things work. And one of the things I think we can really make a strength of is being a bit of a test bed. Because if we can make it work with some of our challenging, we talked about the rural landscape, the towns, the challenges with flooding, then, you know, what a fantastic opportunity to learn from that. So in terms of regrets, Councillor Patient has said, it's really about how much more there is to do and the pace at which we need to go, that the nature of it being a climate emergency and the emphasis on the emergency is that we need the resources to go further and faster, particularly post-COP. And I know there are young people, he was particularly proud of the work of young people and how they've embraced the climate emergency. And I know we had a local young person who walked to London to bring attention to that agenda. So there's such a lot of work going on and he was just immensely proud of that, really. And so he just wanted me to share those thoughts with you. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Questions, anybody? To anybody?
Sorry, just to interject, did you realise that's my son that did that?
Of course I did, Councillor Courtney.
All right, I didn't know either, so well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions, please, for portfolio holders or Sheila Regan? Hang on, somebody was fast there. Regan. Do you have your hand up, Regan?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, it's a bit slow off the mark. Yeah, it's a little bit of an issue that is slightly close to my heart. It's the in terms of the cycle network. I don't know about how it would be done or very much about it at all. But I think it would be wonderful if somehow we were all able to organise the cycle path, the canal path, basically between Hebden Bridge down to Brickhouse. I mean, the Brickhouse section's pretty good. You know, you can cycle that very comfortably all the way to Halifax, up to the locks at the or what I call the marina there. And after that, it starts to get a little bit patchy, and you need more of a mountain bike than you do a road bicycle. But it would be a pet project of mine, I suppose, in some respects. Whether that might be a possibility of basically turning it into a really safe cycle path that goes all the way from Hebden Bridge to Halifax, through Sawby Bridge, and onto the other end of down to Brighouse. And as I think about it, I don't know what the situation is. I've never been on it that far between, say, Hebden Bridge and Todd. Thanks.
I don't. Do you want to?
Bit specific, I know. Sorry, but
yeah. So Scott's not here.
Chair, I share those aspirations really, and important to make a difference between the canal towpath and Route 66, which doesn't entirely cycle path by Sustrans, which doesn't entirely follow the canal towpath. There are a number of challenges. And I think the key thing about cycling is to know that there are keen people, commuter cyclists with high spec bikes who just want to go on the road and get from A to B very quickly. There are leisure cyclists, and there are all kinds of things in between. And we need to provide the right cycle path for the right situation. And there are a number of challenges, not least you would discover, had you gone from Hebden Bridge to Todd, the problem of the sills, the canal overspills, and which need a particular technical solution. But you might want to come to the cycle forum that Councillor Patient, I think, chairs, where there's really pretty keen discussion about how we might find some solutions to those things. But we do share your aspirations, definitely.
Yeah, you like that, Regan? Anybody else?
Yeah, thanks. I wouldn't mind a bit more information about the cycle forum. I used to be a cycle racer, racing cyclist back in the day, about 3 stone ago.
Well, if you get this path done, you can start again. Paul, did you have your hand up? I can't see from here. Are you on mute?
Yes, I did, Chair. Thank you. I want to try and get this out without it sounding too discombobulated. But one of the things, listening to what's going on, I think we're in an ideal position, or Elland is in an ideal location for potentially a charging hub for electric vehicles from the M62. That would also generate income for the businesses as well within Elland. So it's basically 2 birds with 1 stone here, improving the economy of Elland, but also working towards improving the climate by having that charging hub for people coming off the M62. Ideal location for it. So it's just a suggestion, is that really, for probably Cabinet to look at.
Okay, thank you. Who else was?
I've got my hand up, Chair.
Sorry, Sarah. You're
yes.
on top of it, and my apologies. Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah. So just a quick thing on the cycling. In fact, widening our ambitions from Manchester through Todmorden. I know people do cycle to Manchester, and I don't know how. I think they can do quite a lot of it on the towpath actually, going through. And and I think being part of that sort of Transpennine journey, not just within Calderdale, but sort of being part of the really important bit in the middle. Across the country, and we could, be a beacon there. I did the safer. Oh God, I'm not going to get the name of it right, but the Safer Streets Network, the Sustrans training that Scott Patient was encouraging us to, I think, to do. We've got an email about it. I would absolutely recommend that. Really interesting training. Really good to look at the sort of different things that you need to think about, and obviously there's sort of funding around. For making our streets and place better. I mean I'm not on this board, and I'm just a sub, but I really enjoyed that training. I would absolutely recommend it. It was an hour and a half, and there's lots and lots of different dates available. Really good, really interesting.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything do you want to add?
Councillor Smith, Councillor Caffrey.
All right, sorry, I didn't see you.
No, that's fine.
Oh, you're off page, sorry.
Whoops, can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you now, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see you.
I was just looking at the active conversations. I know they've been going on for a while. I just wondered, how you're sort of measuring that, and what outcomes, what things have come out as a result of that, because it's a really nice, it's an interesting initiative. But also on the other ones where we are focusing on cycling, I suppose just wondered, how many cyclists are there in the sort of North Halifax area where we're trying to get the new route planned, and is there a plan to sort of, I don't know, how are we promoting it? Is there more take up in North Halifax as a result of the work that you're doing? And then as well on active travel, I'm just really quite obsessed with rights of ways and maintaining them. And I suppose I would really like to see that we don't forget about walkers.
Somebody want to address that question, or shall I is it just to go into the pot?
Just want me to shut up?
Can I just make a comment about North Halifax cyclists? I hardly ever see any. That is all I can say. And I think we'll have to suck it and see when the schemes are completed. I think it's probably easier to walk into and out of Halifax from North Halifax than it is to cycle.
Well, in some parts it's easier to get a bus because some of it's 1 in 3, isn't it? But
well, true, yeah.
The terrain.
But I certainly won't be joining the cycling coming up from 3 miles uphill.
But I'm only a sort of one that uses it to get from A to B. I won't get up in the morning, just go for a bike ride. But anybody got any questions? Anybody else? No. Well, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Sheila, again for your contributions. Oh, are you waving?
Anybody got any answers about investment in public rights of way? Is that going to be sort of something that's included?
Who wants to take that? Jane, can you take that? Sorry, you're on mute.
There's a long answer in terms of the detail. There is. We've recently recruited to the rights of way team because we had some staff poached away by neighbouring authorities. The government have brought in legislation which basically indicates that you have to produce a definitive footpath map by 2026. And that has a number of organisations, including the Ramblers Association and equestrian societies, etc., all doing very extensive lobbying. And indeed, I know that North Yorkshire County Council and other councils have basically said the government should extend that period because we do want to protect our network of footpaths. Actually, in West Yorkshire, we've got a particularly dense network of footpaths, and Calderdale are up there, I should think, one of the densest network of footpaths in the country. But finding the money to do them up is hard. Making sure that we have got an absolutely definitive map is creating a lot of work for the staff at the moment. And I think there are about 70 outstanding footpath issues that the staff are working through at the moment. But we are really, really committed to footpaths in terms of active leisure and so on, and people just getting from A to B. I listened to a 90-year-old telling me about how she used to use a footpath that's now closed, that we have protested to the Secretary of State about, and she used to use it to walk down to Soby Bridge from London Foot to the pub, sort of for the last 80 years. So there is a lot to do, but we are strongly committed to our footpath network in Calderdale.
Thank you, Joe. You okay with that, Audrey?
Yeah,
yep.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions for anybody?
Councillor Beach.
Sorry.
Yeah, just one thing. I had heard about this map that you're creating. Does it include bridleways as well as footpaths? I wonder, Jane.
Chair, it includes rights of way. It's a rights of way map, so it does include bridleways and footpaths. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Gail, for that. Well, if nobody's got any more questions, just say again, thanks very much for the contributions and thanks for that. I like the chart actually. It's a good way of summing up things, isn't it, rather than putting lots of narrative in paragraphs. So thank you. Right, thanks all. the meeting schedule next week, Mike, haven't we? So if you don't want to get involved in that, good night to those who, if you want to listen, by all means do so. If I don't see you, have a good Christmas.
Was that closing the meeting, Chair?
No, I'm just inviting those who want to stay for our work programme. And I mean, people have actually stayed for it, which actually amuses me.
Well,
non-members, I mean.
very brief. I'll be very brief, Chair.
Yeah, right, don't worry.
We're doing some preparatory work tomorrow with Sian Rogers on the item on the voluntary sector. And I think we're meeting with Stephen Lee next week to talk about the upcoming item on transport. So we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think I'd have to say, I think when we, and Fazan has been good at setting up these meetings and getting this going. Having preparatory discussions with Andrew and with Heidi before the items today was really helpful. So we're trying to plan ahead. I think that the issue of the petition Save Our Shops, I think, has been resolved, and so I think that will move off the agenda in February. And Councillor Smith, in particular, has asked that we have an item at some stage in the spring, I think, on enforcement. So if it's all right with members, we'll add that to the programme for March. That's all I need to say.
May I bring something up, please?
Sorry, Regan.
Sorry, yeah. Last time I noticed that it's been added to the work programme with regard to the Safer, Cleaner, Greener team with the mowing and everything else like that. But I also mentioned about the problems at planning at the moment with the planning applications and everything else like that. I was wondering if that was going to have a place on the work programme as well. I thought it was going to be taken on, but I hadn't seen anything on the work programme.
I think it's just at the top of that page. It's on the 20th of January, I think, Regan.
Oh, sorry, forgive me. Let me just double check.
It's dropped at page 5. It's just dropped off a bit onto the next page.
Yeah, it's on for the next meeting, Councillor Dickens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not till next year, but it's not that far off.
December, January, to the cabinet, community, and onto the next. Right. Yes, I did miss it. My apologies. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on a different page. That's why you missed it.
Yeah.
Sorry. What were we talking about before that? Oh yeah, enforcement, mate. What enforcement was that? Was that to do with litter and stuff like that, or just a general enforcement?
I think Councillor Smith, when she spoke to me, was in. I mean, she's here and she'll talk for herself. But
I thought she'd gone.
Certainly, the role of the different wardens in enforcement was the headline of it. I think Councillor Smith rights of way also cropped up in our discussion.
Right, no, that's right. Sorry, I didn't know you were there, Audrey. I thought you'd gone.
No, I am here. I'm listening. I was just swishing between two screens. Yeah, just the different, because I suppose when we look at things like fly tipping, we see that it's a national problem that enforcement rates are really low, and it's just about what can be done, what's been done better elsewhere, and
right. No, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So we're pretty full, aren't we, Mike? Well, we're not completely full, but we're not going to be short of things to debate, are we?
And plenty to do, Chair. And,
So
and the cabinet budget proposals as well next month,
right,
which is important.
I think we'll be all right for next January, don't you? Yeah. Right. Okay. They'll be all right with that work programme. Anything else we wants to add immediately? No.
No, fine.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Another